Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm now joined by Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hello, Joe Devine.
Hello, Seb Stafford-Bloor. You and I have a special guest today, don't we? Because
We
Alex
sure do.
is away. He's had the weekend off. He texted us at about 4 o'clock on Sunday to say, I took the wrong weekend off because all the football was good. Ha ha ha! What a fool. But his loss is our gain, isn't it? Because today we can reintroduce for the second time in this game-ready era that we're in, the Millman, the Millerman, the Dr. Miller, the large mill, the flour mill, Nick Miller.
Hello. I actually arranged this all. I gave Alex the sense that this was going to be a poor weekend of football, so he took it off and then arranged some really good football. So firstly, I would be invited onto the podcast and then have some stuff to talk about. So it was all me.
That's why they call him Miliavelli. That's his other nickname. Well, thanks for joining us, Nick Miller. Today, Nick Miller joins us to talk about Tottenham, Manchester United, West Ham, Leicester City. We also do the Man City Leeds game, some broad themes. Hey, we travel to the continent to discuss Stuttgart and Dortmund, and also Real Madrid, Barcelona, El Clasico, of course. Of course I knew that was happening. And there's a final rotundment, that's not a word, all the way to Joe's quotes and facts database at the end of the podcast. Extra longy today. It's an extra longy episode. So stick with us because it's really worth it at the end, as it definitely is 100%. You'll be happy you got to the end. That's what people say, isn't it? Anyway, that's all for now. And for today, I will leave you in the warm hands and the very, very cool embrace of Miliavelli. Tottenham won. 3 Manchester United. A big game. It was a big game for everyone involved. And one that clearly mattered to supporters. A friend of the podcast, Paul Ansouch, was tweeting beforehand about his emotional involvement with the game. Unwanted, I believe. Followed it up with a wry tweet saying, I hope that we win the Sheringham-Berbatov-Carrick trophy. He's, of course, a Manchester United fan. And that's a reminder that this rivalry does, or did, sort of, exist before Jose Mourinho. But we will talk about him. Yeah. Great second half. Manchester United kicking into a gear that Tottenham just couldn't keep up with on the day. Goals from Cavani, Greenwood and Fred, of all people, to answer Son's very well taken first half goal. Let's do Tottenham first, though, Seb, because it'll be funnier. Mourinho, same story as United, as we have discussed before. It's not really an if, but it's a when, probably. How much longer until it's over do you think? Not do you want?
Ooh, okay, that's quite conflicting. Soon. It has to be soon, because I think what has done it for quite a few people was probably the weird little rant afterwards about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's comment about Son. Yeah. It's a kind of it was the jump the shark moment with his distraction tactics.
You do always have to feed your kids, though, Seb. That's just
you do. It is important. For the sake of avoiding any kind of confusion, let me just say that I absolutely advocate the feeding of people's children. That is a good thing.
Also, just if I could butt in here, bread is bread and cheese is cheese. So you can't pick holes in the facts. To be fair,
no, you can't.
I feel like translated back into Mourinho's native Portuguese, that might be a little bit more, I don't know, a catchier kind of idiom.
Yeah.
I don't know. Soon, I hope. Look, it's not going anywhere, is it? It has to be brought to an end.
I mean, maybe at the point at which Tottenham potentially don't qualify for the Champions League through Premier League finishing positions, that would seem like a natural point.
Well, I just don't see that as a realistic goal anyway. I mean, I know the table suggested it might be, but if you look at the teams above them, Jack Pitt-Brooke wrote a very fine article this morning for The Athletic in which he said that, yes, Spurs are on the heels of Liverpool, Chelsea and West Ham, but they're significantly worse than all three of them. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what he said. And he's right. The goal now is actually to probably secure Europa League qualification because club needs a revenue source. I honestly think the best way of the best chance Tottenham have of doing that is to get rid of Jose Mourinho now, just get him away from the players and see if you can ride a little bit of a bounce and then think again in the summer about what to do full time, because it just looks very alienating. I watched on, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I caught Son Heung-min's interview after the game, and he's probably the happiest, smiliest player in the club's history. And he looked like he wanted to burst into tears afterwards. And
Yeah,
he's
well,
saying,
I'm going to come to that because I think we can discuss players. Some of the other players looked a little bit disappointed afterwards, and of course there was the news of Harry Kane too. But before we do, a question for the Millman. I assume you watched the All or Nothing series on Tottenham. You would have seen how much Daniel Levy was, how much admiration he appeared to have for Jose Mourinho. Put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Levy. What would you be doing and thinking at this point?
You know what? Actually, I think I'm one of the only people who didn't watch the Tottenham All or Nothing. Because
he's like a doting grandmother. He's very excited, like he can't get enough. It's like he's sitting with a famous person. He's allowed to go to lunch every day with Jethro Tull or something, you know? Not that, but something else.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, just for to pull back the curtain of the on the podcast here, before we were recording, Joe was having a dig at Seb for using arcane references, and he pulls Jethro Tull out of the bag for this one. Good lord.
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
Anyway,
I'm
yeah.
just so glad you've revealed the hypocrisy at the heart of this podcast. It's been a long time coming.
The rotten core at the heart of the Tifo podcast. I don't know. It's odd because he seems to be a very kind of logical, pragmatic man. So it sort of, I don't know. In some ways, it humanizes him too, because you kind of think of him as this kind of business machine and the guy who was kind of stalking around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as it was being built, and pointing at a light switch and saying, I want that different, that kind of thing. But to see him kind of so sort of puppyishly impressed by another human being, or it almost makes me warm to him. But then you think, no, that other human being is Jose Mourinho. I'm not. I can't. I can't countenance this. Particularly when it's actively damaging the football club that he is supposed to be in charge of. I mean, you kind of mentioned before that it's kind of the same old story as United, and of course it is in many respects. But I know Jose Mourinho gets he got a lot of flack for that whole thing where he said finishing second with that United team was the greatest achievement of his career, or whatever it was. But that, while that was obviously kind of nonsense to a certain degree, he looking at the squad in that season, they overachieved. I think it's very different with this Tottenham team, in that they are quite evidently less than the sum of their parts. I mean, even if you don't rate the defence or the midfield or whatever, and we could get into Roy Keane versus Jamie Redknapp territory quite easily here, but any team with Son and Kane up front and the various kind of other attacking talents, and there's no way that they should be seventh, and by the time this pod goes out, possibly eighth. So while I do kind of almost warm to Daniel Levy for being so childishly impressed with a famous man that he's managed to sort of attract to his club, not if it's damaging that club.
Well, I think also, I mean, you make a really good point, because I said the same old story as United, but one of the key differences was the place in which both teams were at relatively before Mourinho arrived. Now, Manchester United had won the FA Cup under Louis van Gaal, but the manager the decision had already been made to let him go. Fans were very disappointed with the sort of the football that appeared to be kicking the ball sideways and backwards, and there was a general unhappiness about the situation, relatively, or at least in comparison to what they were achieving relatively recently under Ferguson. Whereas Tottenham, everybody loved Pochettino, right? They played this exciting brand of football, which had tailed off a little bit towards the end of Pochettino's reign there. But it wasn't like the supporters were, generally or overwhelmingly unhappy with what was happening before Mourinho arrived. So I think there probably is a bit of a difference there too. Let's talk about the players, though. Seb, you hinted at it before, but it did feel like a bit of a watershed moment after the game for some of these players. I continue to watch the broadcasting footage, and they all looked extremely unhappy. There was a moment where Kane looked like he just wanted to head straight down the tunnel, and Mourinho sort of had to summon him back for a limp handshake. Son was obviously dismayed as well. He couldn't understand what had happened. You assume some of them must be thinking about their futures. And in fact, of course, on Saturday, The Athletic reported that Harry Kane is considering just that, if Spurs don't qualify for the Champions League next season, Seb. So it did have the look of an end game where players were suddenly thinking, oh, maybe I should get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't really blame them because what are they supposed to be part of it? It shows that the players seem to have given up on, it's a horrible kind of footballism, but the project. They don't really have any faith in what the club is doing under Mourinho. And maybe this goes deeper. Maybe this is about what the club is doing under ENIC, and what a lot of these players came through with Pochettino. They were on the verge of winning significant trophies, and they have kind of fallen back off that. And that must be very, very dispiriting, because if you get to that point and you don't have the reinforcement from the board, the financial reinforcement and the support, then you think, why am I sticking around here? And if you're Kane, if you're Son, both in their primes, both probably got one more big contract left to sign in their careers.
Both played in the Champions League final for Spurs, right?
Both have played in the Champions League final. Both are regarded as world-class players, quite rightly. I mean, I think there's a very big difference between Harry Kane wanting to leave Tottenham and Harry Kane being allowed to leave Tottenham. That's, I just, you can't see, primarily because I think if Daniel Levy sanctions Harry Kane's sale, I think that has to be one of the last things Daniel Levy does as chairman. I don't think the relationship between the fan base and him is retrievable once that happens. So that's very difficult. But you can't blame them. And I fair enough. Why would you want to be part of this? Also, why would you want to be part of this if you were a forward? I mean, ironically, Son and Kane have played some great football at times this season. But if you look at sort of the tactics employed, particularly yesterday, I think between Tottenham taking the lead and Manchester United equalising, I put this on Twitter, but I think Tottenham had something like 25% possession.
Yeah.
It's just so predictable and so fearful. Jonathan Wilson wrote a fine piece in The Guardian about the kind of the fear that Mourinho imbues his football teams with now. And that was the best example you could probably find from the whole of the season.
But you also think, talking about Manchester United as well, I guess we can maybe move on to... I'll tell you what, let's do Harry Kane first before we go.
Okay.
Because Harry Kane, as you say, like the difference between him wanting to leave and being allowed to leave is quite significant. He is not super near the end of his contract. He'll obviously be extremely expensive. And crucially as well, Nick Miller, this comes at a time when the market isn't quite right for a player of that calibre to be sold, right? We would think if there are going to be any deals for over 100 million euros this summer, it's going to be for a player like Haaland or Mbappe, or a player who has significantly longer, or is shorter in the tooth, would they say. Harry Kane feels like the wrong person to buy for the wrong amount of money at the wrong time this summer.
Yeah, I think it was a point made in the Athletic piece that sort of reported that Kane was looking to try and force his way out. That firstly he did himself over by signing this 6-year contract a couple of years ago, thus kind of drastically reducing his options, which is a sort of welcomed at the time as being a sign of unfashionable loyalty to a particular club, but he's just it's the sort of signing that someone would have made 3 or 4 years ago. Someone would have said, well, okay, we'll take. Say we sign this guy for 5 years, and the last 2 years are kind of, he's over 30 then, and he's a bit creaky. But the first 3 years will be worth the 120 million or 150 million or whatever it is. But clubs just aren't able or willing, able, whatever, to spend that kind of money. And it's a similar thing with Mo Salah, really. There are sort of constant sort of background fridge buzz noises that he might want to kind of move on to somewhere else. But the main candidates to spend the kind of money that it would take are, firstly, haven't got the money, and if they have got the money, if they can kind of reach them back of the sofa and scrabble together enough pennies to pay a lot of money, then as you said, they are going to go for someone younger and more promising, more exciting, arguably better than in Haaland or Mbappe. So
do you think Man City might be the sort of team who'd go for it if they missed out on Haaland?
Yeah, possibly, but I mean, there's we talked about the kind of the stubbornness of Daniel Levy before. I would imagine that he won't, or will do his best not to countenance selling Kane to a different to another English club.
Which basically makes him unsellable at the moment due to the financial situation in other countries.
I wondered, this was a sort of hypothetical I think I saw on Twitter the other day. Has the relationship, and Seb, you could maybe answer this either personally or as a kind of, vibe of the general Tottenham support. But let's say you sell if you sell Harry Kane for 120 million, let's say, and that guarantees that Jose Mourinho is gone on the same day, do you take that deal?
Do I personally?
Let's go personally, and you think with the kind of wider fan base.
Yeah, I think I take it because I think, personally speaking, I think Kane is owed a better chance than silverware than Tottenham are currently giving him. This is not like Modric or Bale, who cashed in, a few fleeting years at success, although extraordinary performances, just to say, right, I want to move up further in the game. Kane has given Tottenham every chance to build something around him, and for a while they did, and then they just dismantled it. So I think so, but also I think I would settle for something even less than that, because I don't think you could even make the argument that let's sell Harry Kane and reinvest the money, because do you have any trust in Tottenham to reinvest it well? I don't think so. So I think you bite the bullet with Mourinho, irrespective of what you do with Kane. You bite the bullet with Mourinho. You settle for a couple of years of meager transfer policy, perhaps giving some of the younger players, the sort of the Dane Scarlett types, kind of a run into the first team for a couple of years. A few gradual
the pot
minutes.
Man cometh, Seb. The pot man.
Just anyone else. Just it can be. I don't know. To be honest with you, you can manage Tottenham by Twitter poll for all I care. I mean, just make it stop.
It does seem we kind of mentioned it earlier, but the sad Son Heung-min thing, it just seems to be that seems the final straw. You can take the dismal performances or the kind of performative, distracting nonsense after the games, and Mourinho's general kind of all-round kind of awful vibe, but making Son unhappy. That's
drain the sun. Sure. You got to go.
You know what's really telling is that people aren't actually that angry. They just don't care, and that's much worse. And if you're Daniel Levy, that's the thing that you should be worried about. When supporters are raging, it's okay, because that's what supporters do. It's one of the two states that they exist in. When they just don't give a shit, that's the time when you have to start thinking about.
Well, because you're in a lose-lose situation in yesterday's game, because it feels to me, watching it, like either Spurs are going to lose, as you would expect them to, and that'll be kind of depressing and a continuation of the current state of affairs, or Mourinho is going to win, and it's all going to be about Mourinho, and then Spurs fans are left with a situation where you have one of those events that extends the inevitable, like one of those milestones tricky, which pushes the end date by another month or something, because, remember that Man United game, maybe that was a sign of things to come. Like, it seems like a lose-lose.
I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, during the game, you always want the team to win. I speak for myself, can't speak for everybody, but I know what you're getting at, and you're right. It is a really awkward situation to be in, but it tends to be an awkward situation after full time. During the game, you want the side to win, always.
You always want the side to win, but the point I'm making is that Mourinho takes the win for himself. That's what it feels like.
The losses are about the players, the wins are about him. And
that's what it feels like, and it's kind of upsetting. Anyway, speaking of the win, Man United, they did a win. They extended their unbeaten streak away from home. They've won something ridiculous, like 25 points from losing positions. And as a team, they do feel closer to that top elite group than they have done in a long time, Seb.
I sure do. They were actually great on Sunday, I thought.
They were. Do you know what they did? They
Tell me.
played a game of football and they won it and dominated it in a way where they didn't have to score goals on the counter-attack, or they didn't score goals in the way that we've come to know them do extremely well for the last year or two. It felt like they'd added a dimension to that game. In fact, we are going to talk about Cavani.
It was intricate. It wasn't pace
intricate.
and capitalising on numerical mismatches. There were some really nice interchanges around the edge of the box that I thought, particularly for the equalising goal. I thought that was a brilliant move.
For the Fred goal.
Yeah.
That goal reminded me of... Do you remember that goal Olivier Giroud... No, Jack Wilshere scored. That amazing Arsenal goal where Olivier Giroud did the back heel
It was nothing
at the very
like
end.
that. It was
No, I know it was nothing like that, but positionally, it had nothing of that grace. But Fred started in the place where Wilshere started, and he scored from the place where Wilshere scored, and he made the same passes in the same directions. That's why it reminded me of it. There was
He
that.
still managed to make
no
it look
tightness,
a bit clumsy.
There was no.
But it was. Yeah, I take your point.
It was the poor man's version of that goal. But I thought, is that Fred? Fred gives and receives 3 passes and then scores. What? It's like almost as if to add insult to injury in this game. Fred scored. I like Fred. I think he gets a bad rap.
It was also it was a victory earned by sort of not every 10 players standing around and kind of shrugging, and then Bruno Fernandes does something extraordinary. Which
absolutely.
This is kind of, I don't know. Is this progression? Is this a team kind of learning and improving before our very eyes? It could well be.
I think it's Paul Progression Pogba. What do you think?
Yes, quite possibly. And it's probably not a sort of huge coincidence that he I don't know, when did he kind of come back in the team and start to be actually good?
A couple of months ago, maybe.
Yeah, 6 weeks ago. Probably not a coincidence that they seem to have kind of progressed once they've finally found a decent home for Pogba. You mentioned them sort of coming back to win ludicrous amounts of points. I looked up they have equalised, so that they have conceded a goal conceded a lead to opponent 15 times and equalised 11 times this season, which is 73%. And I don't think any other club in fact, no other club in the Premier League has got more than 50% of that. Just as a sort of illustration, Liverpool have also conceded the lead 15 times and they've equalised 6 times. So I don't know. That kind of thing is always only really explainable by intangibles. You can it's good team spirit, or they never give up, or they're playing for Oli, or whatever it is. So it's a little bit difficult for us to kind of put our finger on exactly why that's happening, but it's happened. Obviously, it's happened too many times for it to be a coincidence or fluke or anything like that.
And also, he always talks about it, right? That was it's a bit of a joke when Solskjaer first returned to United that he did that Ferguson impression. He repeatedly talked about the values of the culture when he was there as a player, and one of those things, you can never count the team out. Obviously, he is the perfect emblem of that for the 1999 Champions League final. You can never count United out. He referenced that repeatedly over and over again when he first arrived, and now, as you say, you can see it happening. So it doesn't feel like a coincidence, does it?
That thing of him kind of for the first year or so of his tenure just repeating, "This is Manchester United," or as a slight variation on it, "This is Manchester United Football Club." Maybe we all took the piss out of him, and I think the last time I was on this podcast, we may have even taken the piss out of him for saying that. But maybe we were the fools all along. Maybe this is all that was just simply laying the groundwork, and it's manifested itself in this kind of these great powers of redemption throughout the season.
I think humans are just easy to work, because I feel like I'm an intelligent person, with critical thinking abilities, and I can go, I see what's happening here. But when the advert tells me to buy Coke,
Are you about to tell us that you've been manipulated by Ole Solskjaer's rhetoric?
That's
Is that
right.
where we're heading with this?
This is Manchester United Football Club. What we're doing right now, that's what this is. It's very confusing for anyone who's not actually working at the club. If they keep hearing the same message that the players hear, they think I live in Manchester United Football Club, and I am confused about where I work, and it's a very confusing time. Let's talk about Cavani now, though, because I don't think here's a hot take for you. It's a hot take. I don't think United score those first 2 goals without Cavani, or at least with Martial or the other options that they would ordinarily play in that space. If he does decide to return to South America next season, which is something which is very much on the cards, I think the club, surely, this experience will have to have taught them that surely they have to replace him in order to win those sorts of games. We talked about Paul Pogba's influence, maybe adding another dimension to what Fernandes already provides. Cavani was totally crucial in those first 2 goals, and I feel like, they need a striker that isn't Anthony Martial. What do you think, Seb?
I agree with you entirely, Joe. I don't think United have another player who moves in the box like Cavani.
No.
Also,
that header was so great. I know it was really simple, but just that he executed it everything well. I just thought, that was good.
It was like, do you remember the header he scored against England in the 2014 World Cup? Very much like that. I mean, it was obviously a different corner, but it was just clever. It took note of the goalkeeper's position. It found exactly the right spot in the goal. It was lovely. Also, I really liked his finish for the disallowed first goal. Love the way he moves away from the defensive line and positions his shot. Like he's just such a smart forward. You can't, if you're Manchester United, you can't go into next season either without him or without someone that kind of does a pretty good Edison Cavani impression, I think.
Who's that though? I mean, if they're not going to get, Haaland, for example, who's obviously is wanted by everybody and may not leave. I don't know if there is a player out there that Edison Cavani, as referenced by Gary Neville multiple times every single time he plays football in the commentary, he's the best at that, isn't he? The in the box front post movement stuff.
Yeah, I still have a little bit of a worry about United about their propensity to do something silly in the transfer market, because you could see they've leaked a kind of a briefing where they've said if the price for Erling Haaland is too high, we're going to walk away and pursue our other options, which means they might have a run at Harry Kane, but that's going to cost an awful lot of money. So you could kind of see them doing something a little bit reckless, like narrow Icardi or something like that.
I feel like the Harry Kane thing is an example of the sort of thing they would have done 3 years ago. I feel like actually that opinion is a legacy opinion now.
Which one?
In the trans that they have a silly transfer in them. Because they haven't made one for 3 years. Like they've actually made really smart acquisitions since Solskjaer arrived. I feel like Cavani felt like a return to that, and now we can clearly see that it wasn't. But they haven't done one of those silly transfers for a while. I think they still burned by Sanchez.
No,
well, yeah, but they're Man United. They can't not overpay. Like that's not fair to level at the directors. I don't think it's just a situation that they're in.
Well, you can do. I mean, you don't have to always follow through and pay the tax. I accept completely that Man United are subject to that tax.
Yeah, but then they get loads of shit when they don't. Like this is the other thing, like the most people's response to what you said about them, leaking that briefing that they'll walk away if it's too expensive. That just like pisses fans off. They get upset about that. Man United have a reputation for not paying what they should from the fans, and from outside they have a reputation for overpaying. I feel like it's a sort of winless situation. But I do want to defend them in this case because I feel like the Harry Kane thing, not that Harry Kane would be a bad transfer, but that I do think the Alexis Sanchez transfer burned them. I think they remember that because they haven't made a bad one for 3 years.
Well, if you look at the individual deals, I'm not sure I entirely agree. I don't think Alex Telles is a particularly good player.
Look what he did to Luke Shaw.
What he did to Luke Shaw, that makes it sound like he's bullying him in training.
No, listen, he arrived, and now Luke Shaw is in the best form of his career and is back playing for England and was the best player in the first half of this game. He's probably Man United's player of the season, right? If it wasn't for silly old Bruno Fernandes.
His rejuvenation began before he arrived at the club.
I don't know about that.
No, I think that's one of the things you credit Solskjaer for. I think the Aaron Wan-Bissaka fee was much too large. I really like him as a defensive player. I think there are good offensive elements to him, but it's a little bit tricky. I think
there's a Manchester United tax. I think there's a Manchester United tax.
There always is, but then it's not necessarily just a Man United tax. It's a big Champions League qualifying club tax that all clubs at Man United's level of the game.
I think there's an additional Manchester United tax. Millman, weigh in here, the Millman.
I think the problem is that there is a Manchester United tax, but the problem being that Manchester United don't seem to realise that there's a Manchester United tax. So the thing was that they like so with Fernandes, obviously, no one can question the signing. He's been a brilliant
That was
player.
an excellent transfer. Yeah.
Yeah, he's bailed them out of many problems in the past year or so. But the thing about that was that they spent about 3 or 4 months dicking around when Sporting, it was Sporting, wasn't it? Basically said, this is how much we want for him, and United spent however long kind of messing around, trying to get a lower fee and thinking that they could negotiate like any other football club. And then in the kind of last days of the transfer window, they eventually just ended up paying the money that the Sporting asked for in the first place. So they kind of wasted all that time and, wasted however many games they would have extra got out of Fernandes. And the similar thing with Jadon Sancho. They spent the whole of last summer basically kind of trying to stare Dortmund out by thinking that, they were going to negotiate like a normal football club and they were going to get him for less money than they thought, when the thinking that Dortmund were bluffing, or is this was a kind of negotiating tactic, when as it turns out it wasn't. And they just said, well, okay, if you're not going to pay this money, then you're not going to have him. Then and the kind of the artful leak of the well, if Dortmund are asking too much money for Haaland, then we're just going to walk away. Just sounds like a kind of another sort of just sort of another negotiating tactic, or an attempt at a negotiating tactics. Like it's like Edward Wood has bought a book, Transfer Negotiating Tactics 101, and he's now on page 4. While everyone else has kind of written the book.
Stand up and start to leave the building. The car salesman will call you back before you get to the door.
Exactly. It's that kind of thing. It's like the idea.
Oh, me.
So this idea that they're leaking the idea that, well, if you're asking too much money, then we're just going to walk away. Like there aren't 9 other clubs queuing up to buy Erling Haaland, and I know we know the economic situation of the football world at the moment, but Erling Haaland is the sort of player that someone is going to do something stupid for, and someone is going to pay that money for him, whether it's this summer or next summer or whenever it is. But just
the £1 million per week.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I it's strange the way football works. And I remember watching Alf-Inge Haaland sort of trudge around Nottingham Forest midfield in the mid-90s, and I definitely thought at the time, that guy is going to turn into the most highly paid agent in the world.
Give that guy's DNA a bit of a stir, and you'll come across you'll produce a generation-defining forward. Yeah,
don't bother playing this guy in midfield. Let's just put him out to stud and see what happens.
Get him with the sexy horses. Anyway, listen. I'm not saying they're good at it. I'm just saying. I think you're right. The mailman. Seb's not right. We'll be back after this to talk about West Ham and Leicester City, which was maybe the best game of the weekend. Ding, ding, ding. Best game of the weekend time. It was West Ham 3, 2 Leicester City. Fabulous game. Entertaining game. Excellent performances from Jesse Lingard and Kelechi Iheanacho in particular. But let's begin with West Ham, who have rejoined the top 4 with this victory. That's right, they have rejoined the top 4 with this victory. What the hell? Now just 1 point behind Leicester and 1 ahead of Chelsea. So it's tightening up around that area. Seb, this West Ham team reminds me a lot of Moyes' Everton. Now, I'll explain my lazy comparison because it's not as lazy as it sounds. Not necessarily in the way that they play, but in their qualities, yeah? They are physical and they are great on the counter, but they can play, yeah? You don't look forward to playing a team like this because they're sort of unpredictable and they always seem to have a chance. So they remind me of them in that way. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and also it's a team forged out of relatively unheralded players. I could say they are more than the sum of their parts. And I
the rock.
Well, I enjoy watching them. I would have enjoyed it more had you not dropped a huge spoiler in the WhatsApp group.
Well, you
That
should
Yeah, but
indicate that you're behind. And also,
I
that
was 10
wasn't a
minutes
spoiler,
behind.
by the way.
Well,
that
it
wasn't
was
a spoiler.
because
Can I say?
You wrote something like "lol, Lingard." Are you watching?
No.
Which
No,
kind of indicated that something had happened around
actually-
Jesse Lingard.
Actually,
Yeah.
totally unacceptable. Let me read what I wrote to you because I didn't spoil anything. I was just being prescient in a way that you wouldn't expect me to be. I said, have missed the first 20 of this. Are you watching? We haven't spoken much about Lingard, so I'm paying attention to him. This is before he scored. Okay? I said that. And then you said, on delay, just putting up some lighting in my house that's got 4 floors. And then I said, oh, shall I not tell you what's happened then? Lol, I won't. And you said, yeah, no spoilers. A thumbs up from me. Haven't done any spoilers to this point. At which point you say, obviously, other than Jesse Lingard has scored. And I said, no, I said this before anything to tell you about happened. And then that was the last time we spoke. Until
Also,
this moment. That's not true.
Even if there was a kind of indication that Jesse Lingard had scored, is that a huge spoiler? Is that,
No,
isn't
exactly.
that kind of he's playing quite well at the moment, and he's probably going to score in a lot of games? Is that not kind of the equivalent of claiming that hey,
Well,
you know
you're
what,
right.
there's been some kind of backstabbing and underhand dealings in Line of Duty. Huge, what a huge spoiler.
Can you believe it? Friends of the Tory party MPs have got another lucrative contract. Spoiler alert. 8 goals and 3 assists in 9 games for West Ham. Seb, tell me if that's a spoiler. Seb, they were good though, weren't they?
When I
They really
tweet,
were.
when I
They
tweet
really
this
were.
podcast out, I'm going to put the massive spoiler in it that in this podcast Joe bullies Seb. Sorry.
Would you believe it?
It was fun. It really was. It was. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't want to be unfair to West Ham. I couldn't stop looking at Leicester because spoiler or no spoiler, I kind of expected West Ham to be in an advantageous position by the time I started watching, and it just felt like it's happening again. Brendan Rodgers just feels very much like this. This was as bad a half as Leicester have had all season. It's just dreadful.
Do you mean the sort of end of season tail off?
I meant the end of the season tail off, but also the story broke about those players that had broken COVID regulations to go to Ayoze Perez's house party, which it's why James Maddison wasn't playing. So Ayoze Perez, James Maddison, the injured Harvey Barnes, who wouldn't have played anyway, and Hamza Chowdhury all attended a house party at Ayoze Perez's house last week and were dropped for this game, which I don't know. I'm not sure whether I'm being fair to Brendan Rodgers or not, but it was sort of, do your players do that if they fear the kind of the repercussions, or do they just think they're going to get away with it? It just felt like, okay, you're in the top 4, but don't, have a look at that table because you haven't got Champions League football secured yet. In fact, your situation with kind of Liverpool improving, Chelsea all of a sudden looking really good, your situation could become pretty precarious within about 2 or 3 weeks. And West Ham are brilliant. Don't get me wrong. Leicester disappoint me sometimes.
You're not angry. You're just disappointed.
I'm just disappointed. Just disappointed.
All right, we'll circle back to Leicester because I want to talk about Iheanacho, who was really not disappointing in this game. Squad harmony. Nick Miller, squad harmony. I was reading Roshane Thomas's recent pieces on West Ham during half-time, which was fun. He's written a lot about how harmonious the squad is now under David Moyes, which is quite a change from recent seasons. Apparently, they all do quizzes together when they're travelling to games. I didn't say it was fun. I said it was harmonious, right? There's a lot of tight-knit friendships and groups within the squad. Everyone loves a friendship. And Souček and Sofal are known to train together on their days off. This appears to have had a big impact on club culture, like Declan Rice staying behind to practice free kicks and penalties. Also, Jesse Lingard has fit in extremely well, apparently. And crucially, you can see it in the way that they play because they're having a good time. My favourite moment of this game was when Fabianski fell over and landed on top of Dawson. And then they were sort of like lying across each other for 10 seconds and they were having a good old laugh about it. It was just...
That was
Wow.
your takeaway from the game.
It was. I just thought it was funny. They just look like they were having a nice time. That's all I'm saying. They look like they're having a nice time. And you can see the harmonious stuff in the way they play, can't you, Nick?
You can. I mean, it's always slightly tricky to kind of figure out whether the kind of the whole team spirit thing is frequently kind of cited as an explanation as to why teams are winning, and I'm sure it is, but it's always, there was a quote, I think it was from a baseball player, that basically said that team spirit and team harmony is actually bullshit. It's just everyone's happy that you're winning.
Right. Yeah.
And so you're never
like
sure
Barry
whether
Bonds who said that or something.
Was it better? Quite possibly.
Sounds like something you might say.
Yeah, but you're never quite sure which way around it is, whether the team spirit has caused the victories or the victories caused the team spirit. But if it is, let's just kind of say that it is this kind of fine team spirit that has fostered this brilliant atmosphere in the squad, and that's why they're playing really well. It's interesting that this is something that West Ham have been able to do, because it's been something that this season, at a time when the usual things that people do to kind of foster team spirit aren't really allowed. Your kind of standard socialising or team jollies away to wherever, unless you're Celtic, of course, when you just bugger off to Dubai and without any thought to the consequences. But
or a cheering crowd, even.
Well, yeah, I mean that's something that the absence of a crowd has actually done West Ham quite well. But I think Sam Allardyce has kind of talked about this quite early on, and when he got to West Brom, and it's not necessarily an excuse for why he hasn't been able to turn them around, but all the things he would usually do to foster team spirit has gone out the window. It's also something that was mentioned a bit at Nottingham Forest as well. My team, there was kind of two things to this. Firstly, they signed 14 players in the summer, which was insane. But it was doubly insane given that they signed 14 players and there was absolutely no opportunity for them to sort of get to know each other beyond training. So if David Moyes has managed to kind of do this and foster this team spirit, it's kind of interesting how he's done it and why it's been so successful. Someone was going to get it right. It also probably helped that the squad is kind of, that there have been a few additions, but sort of broadly the same as last season. And as Souček and Kufal came in. Well, Souček was Souček here last season? Did he come in on loan?
Came in
last season?
January of last season. Yeah.
So Souček was there. Kufal came in the summer. Obviously Lingard. Who else did they sign? Ben Rama and Dawson. I think they're the only thing. So it's not it's sort of a few decent additions. Or what have turned out to be decent additions, without being kind of, without a huge squad overhaul, which again, we were talking about the sort of transfers that Manchester United don't make anymore. It's not the kind of thing that you associate with West Ham. Like, this January, probably the sensible thing for them to do would have been to sign a centre forward, because they don't really have one at the moment. But they didn't. They clearly looked around. There wasn't anyone that they fancied, so they didn't sign anyone. In fact, they sold Sebastian Haller, didn't they? So it's the sort of thing that a few years ago, that West Ham would have absolutely panicked and either spent some kind of ludicrous amount of money on someone, or loaned in some over the hill creaking centre forward on colossal wages, who would have messed up everything that they had spent the previous few months kind of building. So it's one of many ways in which West Ham have kind of been successful and been sensible and kind of learned from previous mistakes this season.
Well, I did think for the first time, you sort of hinted at it when you were talking there, Nick, but I thought for the first time watching a football game, I wonder what it will be like when fans come back, because it struck me this West Ham team might in some ways be a benefactor of that. I think there are teams, we can say that about. I think Manchester United are a benefactor in some ways of there not being a crowd too. I think there are a sort of list of others maybe, and some that will have lost as well. But I thought this team is really, it's achieving a lot. They're currently 4th place. What will happen, do you think, after a whole season of no supporters, when, let's assume that everything goes to plan with the sort of country rehabilitation and the first game of next season, we have, thousands of fans in the ground. They'll boo at some point, right? Even in the middle of a good run, if something bad happens or if something, they'll boo. And I wonder if the players have sort of forgotten what that feels like. I was thinking if it was me and I was a West Ham player and I got a boo for anything at all in the first 10 games of next season, I'd think, well, fuck you. Where were you last year? We finished fourth. We've had an amazing time. We did it without your fucking booing, and now you're here booing me. Fuck off. That's what I'd think.
Where were you last season? We were legally prevented from being here.
Where were you? You know what I mean, though? It might have an adverse effect. It might, does one forget about the sort of, you must grow numb to the booing, right? But if the booing isn't happening, maybe that shield, that outer crust, begins to peel and flake.
Maybe. I mean, I was kind of to an extent I'm playing devil's advocate here, but the other way of looking at it might be that they have, in this year without the kind of distraction of fans booing them, they've sort of, I don't know, healed a sort of, rift or whatever. They've made things better, and in everyone's absence, they've made everyone a little bit happier. So by the time they get back, everyone will just be delighted and won't boo at all, and will bout the feet of Declan Rice for everything he does. Maybe, I mean, that could be absolute bollocks, but
what do they call it? A long distance relationship? Sometimes they work,
but more often than not, they don't.
when you don't really love each other. Okay, Lingard's future. I didn't mean that about West Ham and, fans. I didn't mean it about them. Lingard's future remains uncertain. There is no option to buy clause within the loan contract, so he will return to Old Trafford in the summer. Dun, dun, dun. His contract was recently extended to the summer of 2022, so one would imagine, Seb, that the idea was, and this begins a long period of me talking, was to sell him this summer. Yeah, it wouldn't be lunacy to think that position may have changed, though, because his value could have increased, or maybe Manchester United want to try him again, I don't know, due to his West Ham performances. Other reports suggest that Manchester United have considered the option of using him as part of a deal to try and sign Declan Rice, which I guess would put them in a good position if they wanted to do that. I know Declan Rice will have other suitors too. But also Lingard will now have options because he's put himself back on the map, hasn't he? Even though he's massively outperforming his XG.
Yeah, I suppose so. But if you're Jesse Lingard now and you found a manager who treats you as you want to be treated and gives you a certain degree of importance in a football team, I think you at this stage of his career, bed. Yeah, it'd be a bit silly to turn his back on that and sort of go to Everton or something. I don't see it. I think he'll. I think the contract extension bumps the fee up a little bit, but I think that'll be one of those that's done within a couple of weeks of the season finishing.
Would West Ham pay 30 million for him? That's what United value him at, apparently.
Well, it depends. I mean, if Lingard makes it clear that he only really wants to go to West Ham, then United are going to struggle to get an auction going because that tends to be how transfers work in the sense of agents sort of gather opinion from other clubs.
Always talking, aren't they? Always
talking. Chattering away. So yeah, I don't think it'll be 30 million's a lot given his age, and he 2022 is just a single year, so there isn't that much contract pressure. So sell him now or lose him for free.
It feels like West Ham they're in a. This is probably quite a negative way of looking at it, but almost in a sort of no-win situation here, because if they have the opportunity to buy him after this few months, how brilliant he's been, they can't really not buy him. But on the other hand, paying £30 million for him on the basis of a relatively short period of time, and will presumably give him a 4 or 5 year contract, is exactly the sort of stupid thing that West Ham used to do. I don't know whether it is actually a stupid thing, but it kind of feels like it could be. So I don't know. They may pay 25-30 million for him, and it works out brilliantly. And Jesse Lingard carries on, presumably not at the pace that he has been doing in the last few months, or he turns out to be a very good player for the next few months. But they could also pay a lot of money for him, and he goes back to the sort of the Jesse Lingard of the last couple of years, which we kind of know about some of the circumstances around why he was underperforming in the last couple of years. But yeah, I don't necessarily envy West Ham's position when it comes to.
Would it be kind of good if he stopped playing so well for for the final 6 games? If he just
it's
went back to...
It's probably too late though, isn't it? He's been so good that even if he kind of just stands in the centre circle scratching his arse for the last 6 or 7 games, then he's still done enough to make people think, he's back.
One of those people seems to be Gareth Southgate, because he was spotted making some very diligent notes from the stands in London Stadium after Jesse Lingard's second goal. And you think, okay, so if he's presumably going to be part of the European Championship squad, what if somehow, as a result of injuries or the continuation of this form, he finds himself starting for England, has a really good tournament, and then West Ham are in a position where they might have to pay 50 million. Because if they don't, they're going to get absolutely pelted by their fans, because he's played so well. If you don't take up, not the option because there isn't one, but if you don't take him permanently now, then you're going to get criticised.
You got to take him. I think this is why they always want the option to buy, right? Just so that they don't
absolutely
make him more valuable and then have to buy him.
Well, because if it's a successful loan, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. And also, quite rightly, West Ham fans would say, hang on, you spent 40 million quid on Hilaire, goodness knows how much on Felipe Anderson. If the name is big enough, you'll spend heavily, but just because it's Jesse Lingard, you're not going to spend £30 million when he's actually played very well for us.
Well, so let me say this to you, Seb. Example of a pretty smart business dealing by Manchester United.
I guess so.
Accept it. There he goes. He's accepted it. It means it's true.
It's like the sort of the binary twin to the David De Gea contract.
It just feel a little bit
the world's very worst contract.
It does feel a little bit. Although as you say, Seb has said it. So Seb has agreed. So now it's true. It does feel a little bit more luck than judgment. They didn't. I don't know. I don't think they. I'm not necessarily sure that this would have been part of the grand United plan.
Are you saying that when Bob Dylan wrote Highway 61 Revisited that there wasn't a bit of luck in there? He says he can't even remember writing some of those songs, Nick. Yeah, channeling the universe. Yeah, we do. What you think? Everybody does everything on purpose all the time. Give it a break, Nick Miller. Give it a break.
Christ, well, I mean, taking this argument to this logical extension, there's no point in us doing this podcast, really.
It's literally not there.
It's all. I mean, yeah, true. But it's all luck, and no one means anything, and nothing is explainable. Just another thing about
what is authorial intent? We have no idea.
Just another thing about Jesse Lingard. I think I tweeted this out the other day, but it's going to look for someone in kind of a few years' time who is purely tracking the kind of career progressions of players through international tournament squads. It's going to be really weird for someone looking at Jesse Lingard. Okay, he was in the 2018 England World Cup squad. Then he was in the next the 20 Euro 2021, whatever we're calling it, squad. The next tournament. That must have been a brilliant, seamless, perfectly smooth 3 years in between. He must have been great for all that time to retain his place in the squad.
Fully fledged England international, scoring goals, no doubt, for club and country. It's very confusing. Very confusing. Okay, we were going to talk about Kelechi Iheanacho, but perhaps we'll do that on another Leicester section of another podcast, because we've massively overrun here. But great player, 9 goals in 6 games. We'll come back to him. Okay, we're back now. Manchester City 1-2 Leeds United. Quite a funny game. Key points were, of course, Stuart Dallas's 2 goals, one at the end of each half. Liam Cooper sent off after a VAR call just at the end of the first half. And Leeds, despite defending quite deeply for huge periods in the second half, still managed to win the game. It's quite funny. One might describe this as a snatched victory. That person would be wrong, because that is not a fair description of Leeds' performance, I don't think, Seb. Particularly throughout the first half, they dominated the game, didn't they? And Man City looked a little bit toothless throughout.
Yeah, we actually had a WhatsApp exchange about that, where we talked about this being Guardiola football at its absolute worst, which was just sort of that sterile domination. But no, hugely unfair just to call it smash and grab, because this was... for the first sort of 6 months of this season, the narrative around Marcelo Bielsa has been, he can't coach, a a defence properly, can't install a low block, can only play one way, and it's boom or bust. And this proved it to be bollocks. They were brilliant. They defended so well, especially with 10 men.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you think these people go after they've crawled out from underneath the thing? And then, why is the thing? You know, when the people say they crawl out from underneath it to say a thing and then they crawl back in again? What's the thing?
They're kind of like, what they tend to do is they tend to like start up pro Jose Mourinho Twitter accounts.
Even if they're Manchester City fans.
Yeah, you just move on to the next kind of hopeless topic. You know, just to rally against something. You know.
Sure. Well, anyway.
Hey, do you know what I like, Joe? I did want to highlight this because I felt like it was unusual and interesting and fresh.
Hello.
But afterwards, a reporter asked Marcelo Bielsa whether this was the kind of the realization of some sort of strategy. Had he, you know, being such a diligent coach, had he coached a scenario in which his side were down to 10 men? And he kind of laughed it off and said, nothing that happened today was down to any influence on my part, but I'll bear it in mind, the possibility to train for this situation. And I thought it was really nice because there's a lot of managers who would have grasped that as an opportunity to go, well, yeah, no, of course, we spent 7.5 hours on this specific situation on Friday afternoon, and look at me being a genius.
Oh, I read on The Athletic that one of the funny things about this game was that they trained it this week. Mm-hmm. They've trained for it a lot in the season, and they coincidentally had a session the week leading up to this game where they did the defending with 10 men thing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's nice for a manager not to do because I feel like I've been in a couple of Allardyce press conferences and a few Pardew press conferences where they've tried to kind of seize that praise all for themselves and make it, kind of present themselves.
I take the
as
point.
Sort of the
I'm
we might be across purposes here. Oh, I see.
No,
okay.
yeah, I'm strengthening. I'm saying that, like, even though he should take some credit.
Of course,
clearly,
yeah.
Clearly that works. But even though they trained for that specific scenario, this week he's still saying no.
He does it the other way around. He kind of he does it the other way around as well. When Leeds lose, he does tend to go, yeah, that was my fault. Don't blame the players. I'm not going to kind of. You're not going to get any kind of same coach, different players kind of talk from Bielsa. One of the reasons that he's kind of likable in a broader sense, but probably one of the reasons that that players like him and will kind of gladly buy into this kind of insane way that he works is that you're more likely to do that with a coach that is A, likable, and B, isn't going to throw you under the bus every defeat.
Yeah, he's the inverse Mourinho. I like it. It feels a bit unfair to keep berating you, Seb, because Alex isn't here, so I can't spread out my berating. But in your short answer to my first question, you actually used all of the other questions that I had. So you said, turns out Bielsa can coach a low block. You mentioned that it felt like Guardiola football at its worst, and then you did the Bielsa quote, which was all three of my next questions that summarised this game. So unless anybody has anything random or some jazz scat to say about I'll just stop talking, and you guys you can say anything. Nick Miller.
Well, one thing that was quite nice is that before the game, Guardiola said he'd watched 20 hours of Leeds footage before the game, which was I think he said he'd watched it all in one day, which anyone else you'd think that was a kind of a figure of speech or a huge exaggeration, but you can't. I buy that actually. I can buy that Guardiola genuinely did squeeze 20 hours of Leeds footage into one day.
Time
firstly,
well
it kind of well, exactly. But he kind of firstly it sort of obviously did him no good because Leeds played in a way that Leeds don't generally play, and the circumstances for that are obvious, whether that was by Bielsa's design or it was just kind of players coalescing into this kind of defensive low block naturally or whatever. The other thing I quite liked about this game was it's obviously Guardiola rested a number of players with kind of bigger, more important tests in mind, but it does feel like the sort of result that Guardiola will spend the next 2 or 3 days stewing on, and then do something completely mad for the Dortmund game and completely make an absolute mess of things. I cannot wait.
I like that. Let's do Stuttgart and Dortmund because, we'll probably talk about, we'll almost certainly talk about Manchester City later in the week after the second Dortmund game. Stuttgart and Dortmund, Seb, two German teams. Spinaka?
Really great, this. So one of the reasons why Dortmund are so much fun, I'm not rising to the German bait. One of the reasons why Dortmund are so much fun is because they're so flawed and yet somehow they're still capable of putting together really good moments of attacking football. One of them led to Jude Bellingham scoring his first Bundesliga goal. Nice finish if you haven't seen it. A little bit of shit keeping behind it, but still nice strike. And a first senior goal for a guy called Ansgar Knauf, he's 19 years old, a winger. Some of my Twitter followers, because I sort of questioned who he was, and a couple of people, including Kevin Hatchard and Derek Ray, came back very kindly just to say he was actually one of the best players, or probably the standout for Dortmund's second team for much of this season and last season.
Great name as well, right?
Great name. I don't know very much about him, but the way he took his goal was brilliant. It was so expressive and so confident, and it was one of those things when a young player does it, having I think about 45 minutes of senior football behind him, you really take note. And on a similar vein, not in Stuttgart Dortmund, but in Bayern Munich's very disappointing draw with Union Berlin, Thiago Dantas played. It was his first Bundesliga start, and he's fun. He's a sort of diminutive pivot type with very soft feet, does all the basics really well. And if Alex were here, he would be telling you probably to watch out for him in the future because he looks like a super player. He got snapped up
Another
from...
great name.
Great name, Thiago Dantas. He feels like a sort of... like a football manager regen, or like a sort of someone you might have found in Pro Evolution Soccer before they had any licenses.
To me, it sounds like a 70s cop from Miami. Someone who goes, Thiago Dantas,
Yeah.
Great name.
Yeah, really good name. And he's 20 years old, Portuguese, and he got snapped up from Benfica B on the say-so of Hansi Flick, apparently. So that looks like a deal well done.
Great. Okay. Well, there was also an El Clasico. I don't know if you're supposed to call it the Clasico, which is what I've done, but there was also El Clasico. Seb, you said it was actually the best Clasico in ages.
It was just fun, Joe. It was quite chaotic, and the quality of the football wasn't always great, but it was about an hour of it was played in a monsoon with there was moments in the second half where Zinedine Zidane was actually having to return to his dugout and towel himself down. The rain was so heavy.
You're really speaking my language.
Yeah, it was it was great. It was one complaint, because it wouldn't be me if I didn't have a bit of a moan about something. But the second half included 10 substitutions, a goal, a red card, and a 2.5 minute stoppage while the referee sorted out his sound equipment. And somehow there was only 4 minutes added on. Strange. It's a shame
rigged.
because it was just a shame because the last the injury time was chaos. Marc-Andre ter Stegen was up in the box. Bars hit the bar. Real Madrid were kind of throwing themselves in front of shots, and I just personally could have done with an extra 5 minutes of that. It was just good fun. So a bit of a shame that if you watch enough Spanish football, you see this problem again and again and again. It's just the allocation of stoppage time is just nonsense. It's also if you happen to get injured in stoppage time in Spanish football, that seems to not count. So it's kind of
Just
okay.
the end
It's
of the
just a really
game.
good time wasting tactic. Just lie on the floor and no one will actually add on any time afterwards. So it's don't know.
Come
It's
on,
such a stupid
Spain,
problem to
sort
have.
it out.
Sort
I
it
don't know.
out.
It just sort of feel like a kind of there's this either spoken or unspoken worldwide refereeing understanding that there will only be added time of between 2 and 5 minutes, unless there is some kind of big identifiable, a player got knocked out and the ambulance has to come on or something like that. But it's just like, well, we can't really add any less than 2 minutes, and more than 4 or 5 is just stupid, regardless of whether whether that amount of time has actually been lost in the game. So I don't know.
It's like it's frustrating. Also, it's like it feels as if sort of to do anything other than that without that kind of major incident, like a referee fears being seen as a little bit of a renegade, perhaps. oh, I'm going to add on 15 minutes for all those substitutions and all those 45-second throw-ins you've taken and that minute-long goal kick you took in stoppage time. Just like sort it out. It's not difficult. It's really not difficult.
Particularly in this case, because when added time was being kind of decided on, it was 2-1 to Real Madrid. I'm sure that when he's totting up this kind of thing, he can see the flashing in front of his eyes, the front pages of AS or Mundo Deportivo or something like that. Well, he another refereeing conspiracy. Yeah, another refereeing conspiracy as he adds on, finds ludicrous amounts of added time from nowhere, in which time, Messi scored the equaliser in the 97th minute or something like that. That sort of thing shouldn't come into a referee's thinking, maybe, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Yes, Spain. Yeah. You're not as good.
Joe,
Yeah?
do we have a quotes and facts database?
Is that what we were saying? We do have a quotes and facts database, and we'll go there now. It's Joe's Quotes and Facts Database. Welcome to Joe's Player Quotes and Facts Database. Enjoy the database. Wander around. Look at the walls. They're all full of lights and little buttons. Don't press any of the buttons because you'll die. But the first player is Thomas Souček. I thought we'd do some West Ham today because of their exciting performance. Thomas Souček, position central midfielder. There we go. There's one. Here's a fact about Thomas Souček. According again to lifebogger.com, real quality website, lifebogger.com. I encourage you to check it out in your spare time. Partly because you'll have a lot of fun, and partly because I really get a lot of my material for the Quotes and Facts database from lifebogger.com. So, I'm just going to keep saying it. Here, according to lifebogger.com, Thomas Souček's hobbies include listening to music, sure, swimming, and travelling to see monkeys. So, there's 3 hobbies we can all
What's
understand.
That last one?
Travelling to see monkeys.
So booking holidays to, depending on...
I don't know if there's any need to try and understand it more than
All right.
he's travelling to see monkeys.
He just likes monkeys, and they're not in his house.
He doesn't want to see them outside his house. He wants to travel to see them. I think that's a very reasonable take from Thomas Souček. Here's his quote. He told the Daily Mail, so we know it'll be good. He told the Daily Mail he likes to swap shirts with other players. Okay, who doesn't, But here's the quote. Olivier Giroud is one. I played against him at Chelsea, and I scored against them. I met him in the doping test after the game. I just thought it was a weird quote. Very reasonable that players have doping tests after big games. But I like the idea of those 2 guys in the doping test having a chat, swapping their shirts. It's the benefits of the game, isn't it? It's the pros of the job. What do they call it? The perks of the job. Anyway, Jesse Lingard is the next one. Position AM, of course. Fact. And there's a theme here. Don't know if you'll spot the theme, but I'm pointing it out that there's a theme in case you don't spot it. This one's also from the Mail Online. So again, it'll be good. In 2019, after walking around the park and spotting several different animals, the pair referring to Jesse Lingard and John Stones, the pair were treated to some time with a skillful chimp inside a tent. Both players greeted the chimp with a friendly pat on the back before it then perched on a stool and had some food. And that's from the Mail Online in 2019. And of course, that's the theme there being the primate theme. Don't know if either of you picked up on that, but in the first fact, monkeys were referenced, and in the second, a chimpanzee was referenced. So that's the theme.
Skillful
clever.
chimp.
Skillful chimps, yeah. Whereas Thomas Souček is much more of a socialist when it comes to chimps. He doesn't care if they have skills. The prerequisite for the monkeys that he enjoys is not that they're skillful. It's just that they're monkeys, and I think that's a much better approach to travelling to see monkeys. The quote for Jesse Lingard, I spent ages trying to find. I thought there'd definitely be a funny one for him, but turns out there isn't. So the best one I could find is this one that says, he says, I think if you score, you've got to have fun. Otherwise, what's the point? And I thought, indeed, Jesse Lingard, you do have to have fun. What is the point? I mean, even if you do have fun, what is the point? And that's where we will end today's podcast. It's been a lovely affair. To the millman, to the miller, to the Dr. Miller, to the intangible mill boy, Nick Miller. Ghostface Miller. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Always a pleasure to have you here. Hope you've enjoyed yourself.
I really have. Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Well, that's good. Well, it's working out well, so we'll see you again, whether you like it or not. Seb Stafford-Bloor, thanks to you as usual for your dignified, continuation.
Thank you. I've had a nice time also.
Good. And we'll be back on Thursday. No, Friday. Is it Friday? Yes, it is Friday. And we'll be talking about the Champions League. Alex will be back also. So look forward to that. But for the time being, au revoir. Thanks, T-Pose.
The Athletic.
Brought to your ears by The Athletic, I'm Adam Hurrey, and Football Clichés is the podcast you never knew you needed. Every week, to quite unnecessary depth, we examine the words, the phrases, the accepted wisdom, the mannerisms, the habits, the gestures, the symbols, the sounds, and the smells that everyone takes for granted in football, but which really are the glorious glue that holds it all together. For example, have you ever really listened to the Football League goals roundups? I mean, really listened to them? Because they all sound pretty much like this. Team X went into this game with just one win in their last 13, and when Team Y took the lead inside 4 minutes at Stadium Z, the home fans were probably starting to fear the worst. But Striker A had other ideas, and this game turned on its head in the space of 5 minutes midway through the second half. First, a smart finish from the edge of the box brought Team X level, and he repeated the trick on the hour mark to bring his tally for the season to 22. By now, Team X were in the mood, and although Striker A squandered a gilt-edged chance to complete his hat-trick, on-loan Dutchman winger B made it 3 with a curling effort from long range. Team Y's misery was compounded in stoppage time when midfielder C's late challenge on fullback D saw them reduced to 10 men. An afternoon to forget for manager E's men then, but Team X will hope they have finally turned a corner under caretaker boss manager F. Listen to Football Clichés wherever you get your podcasts, and also ad-free when you subscribe to The Athletic.